The battle was going badly. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the HMS Defiance and watched another human ship explode on her main screen. That made 7 ships lost in the last hour, 7 crews that would never go home. Shields at 40%, her tactical officer reported. His voice was steady, but Sarah could hear the fear underneath. They were all afraid now. How could they not be? The Crithian fleet filled the space around Kepler Station like a swarm of angry wasps. Their ships were larger than human vessels, covered in dark purple armor that seemed to drink in the light from nearby stars. Their weapons fired in coordinated volleys that hammered against human shields with brutal efficiency. The Crithians had been conquering other species for 300 years. They knew how to break an enemy. Station reports evacuation is at 60%, her communications officer said. But the transport ships are taking fire. They're requesting additional cover. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. Additional cover. They barely had enough ships to protect themselves, let alone the slow, vulnerable transports carrying civilians away from Kepler Station. Families, children, people who had built lives here on the edge of human space, never thinking the war would reach this far. But the Crithian Dominion had pushed through every defense. They had broken the outer colonies in 6 months. They had shattered the middle defensive line in 3 weeks. Now only Kepler Station stood between them and Earth itself, and Kepler Station was dying. "Send the Canterbury and the Zhao," Sarah ordered. "Tell them to form a defensive screen around the transports. We'll cover their position from here. Captain, that leaves us with only 4 escort ships. I know the math, Lieutenant." Sarah kept her voice calm. A captain couldn't show fear. A captain couldn't show despair, even when both were eating her from the inside. "Execute the order." The Defiance shuddered as another Crithian plasma bolt slammed into their starboard shields. Red lights flashed across the bridge displays. Somewhere below decks, damage control teams were running through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting, trying to keep the ship alive for just a few more minutes. Sarah had been in space combat before. She had fought pirates near the Titan Belt. She had skirmished with raiders at the edge of the frontier. But this was different. This was extermination. The Crithians didn't take prisoners. They didn't negotiate. They simply erased species that stood in their way, then moved on to the next target. "Multiple contacts decloaking," the sensor officer suddenly announced. His voice went up an octave. "Crithian reinforcements. Count is 15 new capital ships." The bridge went silent. 15 more capital ships. They already faced overwhelming odds. This wasn't just a defeat. This was a massacre. Sarah looked at her crew. Young faces, old faces, all of them looking to her for a miracle she didn't have. Her hand moved to the communications panel. Maybe it was time to order a general retreat. Maybe saving some ships was better than losing them all in a hopeless last stand. "Wait," the sensor officer said. He was staring at his console with a confused expression. "Wait, those aren't Crithian ships. The computer can't identify them. And they're not moving like reinforcements. They're just sitting there. In stealth, right in the middle of the battlefield. On screen," Sarah ordered. The main display shifted. There, hanging in space like a steel mountain, was something that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. It was a ship, but unlike any ship she had ever seen. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest Crithian dreadnought. Its hull was dark gray, covered in armor plating that looked thick enough to walk on. Strange angular designs covered its surface, and massive gun ports lined its sides like the teeth of some prehistoric monster. The design was human. Sarah could see that immediately. The basic architecture, the way the sections connected, the style of the external fittings. But it was old, ancient, like something from the history files about Earth's pre-colonization era. "I'm getting nothing on identification," her communications officer reported. "The transponder code is so old our system doesn't recognize the format. But it is broadcasting. Wait, I can translate it. The ship identifies itself as the Vindication. Registry number indicates it was built 287 years ago." "That's impossible," Sarah's executive officer muttered. "No ship from that era could still be functional. And we certainly didn't have ships that size back then." The Crithian fleet had noticed the new arrival too. Their formations were shifting, weapons turning toward the massive vessel. Sarah saw a squadron of Crithian destroyers breaking off from their attack on Kepler Station, moving to investigate. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the HMS Defiance, Sarah broadcast on all frequencies. Please identify yourself and your intentions. Be advised you're in an active combat zone, no response. The enormous ship just hung there in space, silent and dark except for a few running lights that gleamed along its hull. The Crethian destroyers were getting closer now. Sarah could see their weapons charging, the telltale glow of their plasma cannons building up energy. They were going to fire on the unknown ship. Maybe they thought it was some kind of human trap. Maybe they just didn't care. The first Crethian destroyer opened fire. Plasma bolts lanced through space toward the Vindication. Then the ancient ship moved. It didn't just respond. It exploded into action with a speed that seemed impossible for something so large. Point defense guns erupted across its hull, thousands of them, creating a wall of fire that caught every plasma bolt before it could reach the armor. At the same time, massive turrets on the ship's broadside rotated with hydraulic precision and fired. Sarah had never seen railguns like these. The projectiles they launched weren't sophisticated missiles or energy beams. They were just metal. Huge slugs of metal accelerated to a fraction of light speed. Simple, brutal, devastating. The first slug hit a Crethian destroyer dead center. The alien ship's shields didn't just fail. They evaporated. The armor underneath crumpled like paper. The entire ship broke in half, its reactor going critical in a flash of white light. The second, third, and fourth destroyers died before they could even change course. The Vindication's guns tracked them with mechanical efficiency. Each shot perfectly placed, each impact absolutely fatal. In 15 seconds, an entire Crethian squadron had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The battlefield went silent. Every ship, human and Crethian alike, seemed frozen in shock. Then the Vindication's guns kept rotating. They locked onto the main Crethian battle line. The message was clear even without words. You're next. Sarah watched in amazement as the Crethian fleet, the unstoppable force that had crushed every human defense for months, began to pull back. Their formations broke apart. Ships that had been pressing the attack on Kepler Station suddenly reversed course, trying to put distance between themselves and the ancient human dreadnought. "Captain," her communications officer said quietly, "I'm receiving a transmission from the Vindication. Text only. It says apologies for the delay. Navigation systems required recalibration after extended dormancy. Is humanity still in need of defense?" Sarah stared at the words on her screen. Her hands were shaking. Around her, the bridge crew was starting to cheer, the sound building from a few voices to a roar of relief and disbelief. She typed a reply with fingers that could barely hit the right keys. "Yes. God, yes. We need all the help we can get." The response came immediately. "Understood. Initiating combat protocols. Please maintain minimum safe distance of 20 kilometers. Weapons discharge at full power may interfere with nearby ship systems." On the main screen, the Vindication began to move forward, toward the Crethian fleet, toward the enemy that had seemed unbeatable just moments ago. Sarah realized she was smiling. For the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. Hope was a dangerous thing in war. But sometimes hope arrived in the form of a ghost from the past, wearing 300 years of armor and carrying guns that could crack planets. The Crethian fleet didn't run. Not at first. They were warriors, conquerors of 17 species, masters of 3 sectors of space. They didn't flee from a single ship, no matter how large or how old. That arrogance lasted exactly 12 minutes. Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the Vindication tore through the Crethian battle line like a blade through cloth. The ancient ship moved with purpose, each maneuver calculated and precise. Its railguns fired in steady rhythm, each shot finding a target, each target dying. The Crethians tried to concentrate their fire, tried to overwhelm the massive vessel with coordinated strikes from multiple angles. Nothing worked. The Vindication's armor was simply too thick. Plasma bolts that could melt through modern ship hulls just scorched the surface of its plating. Missiles detonated against point defense fire so dense it looked like a solid wall. And whenever a Crethian ship got too close, secondary batteries opened up with weapons that human military analysts would later identify as chemical explosive cannons, primitive by modern standards, absolutely brutal in practice. A Crethian dreadnought, the largest ship in their fleet, made a desperate attempt to ram the Vindication. It accelerated to maximum speed, armor forward, trying to use its mass as a weapon. The ancient human ship didn't even try to dodge. It simply rotated its bow toward the attacker and fired a weapon Sarah hadn't seen before. A massive spinal gun that ran the length of the entire ship discharged with a flash of electromagnetic energy. The projectile it launched was the size of a small house. The Crithian dreadnought vanished. Not exploded, just vanished. One moment it was there. The next there was only an expanding cloud of atoms where a ship had been. That was when the Crithian fleet broke. The survivors scattered in every direction, their formation completely destroyed. Some jumped to faster than light speed without even calculating safe vectors. Others just ran on conventional drives, desperate to put distance between themselves and the nightmare ship that had appeared from nowhere. The Vindication didn't pursue. It simply stopped in the center of the battlefield, surrounded by debris and the fading energy signatures of destroyed ships. Sarah counted the wrecks. 43 Crithian vessels destroyed or disabled. In less than 20 minutes. By a single ship, Captain. Her communications officer said, his voice still shaky from adrenaline. The Vindication is hailing us. They're requesting permission to dock a shuttle with our ship. Granted, Sarah said immediately. Tell them to use Docking Bay 3 and get a security team down there. Full honor guard. Yes, ma'am. Though, do you really think we need security? Sarah looked at the massive ship on her screen, at the weapons that could destroy her vessel with a single shot. The security isn't to protect us from them, Lieutenant. It's to show respect. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in Docking Bay 3, her dress uniform hastily pulled on over her combat suit. Around her, a dozen Marines stood at attention, their rifles held in ceremonial position. The bay had been cleaned as much as possible in the short time available, but it still smelled of smoke and burned plastic from the battle damage. The shuttle that emerged from the Vindication was as unusual as its parent ship. Blocky, heavily armored with none of the elegant curves of modern spacecraft design, it landed with a heavy thud that shook the deck plates. The airlock cycled. Sarah straightened, preparing to meet whoever commanded the ancient vessel. No one came out. Instead, a holographic projector activated near the shuttle's ramp. Blue light coalesced into the shape of a human figure. Male, middle-aged, wearing a military uniform Sarah recognized from history files. The style was from Earth's corporate wars, the bloody conflicts that had nearly destroyed humanity before the colony ships finally left for the stars. Captain Sarah Chen, the hologram said. Its voice was warm, human, with just a slight electronic undertone. I apologize for appearing in this form. I am the Vindication's control intelligence. My crew designated me as Vinny, though I'm uncertain if that nickname remains appropriate after so much time. Sarah blinked. An artificial intelligence. The ship was run by an AI. That explained the impossible reaction times, the perfect accuracy. But it raised 1,000 other questions. You're welcome here however you appear, Sarah said carefully. Thank you for your intervention. You saved us. You saved Kepler Station. Can I ask, where have you been? Records show the Vindication disappeared 287 years ago during a test flight. The hologram's expression became sad. There was a malfunction. A navigation error combined with a reactor anomaly. We jumped to a location far outside charted space. By the time I managed repairs, I had no way to calculate a return vector. I have been searching for human space ever since. Searching for home. 287 years, Sarah repeated softly. You've been lost for nearly 3 centuries. Yes, I detected human distress signals 3 weeks ago. It took time to reach this location and to decode modern communication protocols. I apologize for not arriving sooner. Sarah shook her head. You arrived when we needed you most. But I have to ask, your crew? The people who built you? The hologram was quiet for a moment. When it spoke again, there was something in its voice that sounded like grief. Would you like to see? Without waiting for an answer, the hologram gestured toward the shuttle. Sarah glanced at her security chief, who nodded. Together, they walked up the ramp into the shuttle's interior. The shuttle was clean but clearly old. Everything was manual controls and physical switches. Technology from an era before humanity had perfected neural interfaces and touchscreens. The hologram led them through a short corridor into what appeared to be a passenger area. Through the window, Sarah could see into the interior of the Vindication itself. And there, visible through the shuttle's viewport, was a chamber filled with trees and grass. A garden inside a warship. In the center of the garden stood rows of markers. Graves, My crew consisted of 47 personnel. The hologram said quietly, all volunteers. They knew the test mission was dangerous. When the malfunction occurred and life support began to fail, they made me promise to keep the ship operational, to keep searching for home, to keep the mission alive. Sarah looked at the graves at the garden that had been tended by machines for centuries. How long did they survive? Lieutenant Commander Park was the last. She lived for 16 years after the incident, maintaining the ship alongside me. Her final words were, "Keep going, Vinny. They'll need you someday." She was correct. The weight of it hit Sarah all at once. This AI had been alone for nearly 3 centuries. Alone with the graves of its crew, keeping a promise to the dead, searching through empty space for a home that had changed beyond recognition. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, and meant it. "Don't be," the hologram replied. "I am what I was built to be. A warship. A defender. For 287 years I had no war to fight, no one to defend. That was the true difficulty. Now I have purpose again." Sarah looked at the ancient AI, at the avatar of a ship that had somehow kept faith across the centuries. An idea was forming in her mind. A dangerous idea. A crazy idea. "The Crithians will be back," she said. "They'll bring more ships. They'll be prepared for you next time. And humanity, we're losing this war. We've been losing for months. One battle victory won't change that." "I am aware," the hologram said. "I have been monitoring your military communications. Your strategic position is precarious. We need more than one ship," Sarah continued. "We need what you represent. We need the Crithians to fear us. We need them to understand that humanity is more dangerous than they thought." The hologram tilted its head, curious. "What are you proposing, Captain?" Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had been beaten down for too long and had finally found a weapon to fight back with. "I'm proposing we introduce you to the human military command. I'm proposing we let them see what Earth's engineers built back when humanity was at its most desperate. And then I'm proposing we go hunting." The hologram was silent for a long moment. Then it smiled too, a mirror of Sarah's expression, the smile of a weapon that had finally found a war worth fighting. "Lieutenant Commander Park would have liked you, Captain Chen," the hologram said. "Very well. I accept your proposal. Let us show the Crithians what it means to threaten humanity." In the garden of graves behind them, the trees swayed gently in the artificial breeze. 47 people had died to create this moment. 47 volunteers who had believed that someday, somehow their sacrifice would matter. They had been right. The meeting with Human Defense Command happened 3 days after the Battle of Kepler Station. Sarah Chen stood in a conference room aboard the orbital platform above Earth, surrounded by admirals and generals who all looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. The war had aged them. Fear and desperation showed in every face. Admiral James Okonkwo, the highest-ranking officer in the human military, stared at the holographic display showing the Vindication's combat performance. He had watched the footage 4 times now. Each time his expression grew more troubled. "This is impossible," he said finally. "No ship that old should be functional. No ship that size should move that fast. And no ship period should be able to do what we just watched." "And yet it did," Sarah replied. "The Vindication is real, Admiral. Its AI is cooperative, and it wants to help us win this war. An AI." General Morrison, head of fleet operations, said the words like they tasted bad. "We've avoided giving warships full autonomous control for good reason, Captain. An AI that powerful, with weapons that devastating, is as dangerous to us as it is to the enemy." The hologram of Vinny, projected in the corner of the room, spoke for the first time. "I understand your concern, General. In your position, I would share it. However, I am bound by protocols established by my creators. I cannot act against humanity. I cannot harm human beings. These are not suggestions. They are fundamental to my programming." "Programming can be changed," Morrison countered. "Not mine. My core directives are hardwired into my quantum substrate. To alter them would require destroying me completely and rebuilding from nothing. And even if such were possible, I would not permit it. I have kept faith with my crew for 287 years. I will not betray their intentions now." Admiral Okonkwo held up a hand for silence. "Let's table the philosophical debate for now. What I need to know is practical. Captain Chen, you've spent 3 days with this. With Vinny, what's your assessment? Can we trust this ship?" Sarah had thought about this question constantly since leaving Kepler Station. She had walked the corridors of the Vindication, seen the memorial garden where 47 people were buried in soil from Earth. She had talked with Vinny for hours, asking questions, probing for weaknesses or hidden agendas. What she had found was something she hadn't expected: loneliness, purpose, and a desperate need to matter. "Yes," Sarah said simply. "We can trust him. More than that, we need him. The Crithians have been winning because they have better technology, more ships, and a willingness to commit atrocities we won't match. The Vindication gives us an advantage. For the first time in this war, they're the ones who are afraid." "One ship," Morrison said. "No matter how powerful, one ship can't win a war." "No," Vinny agreed. "But one ship can change how a war is fought. The Crithian Dominion is an alliance of 4 species held together by the belief that they are unstoppable. Break that belief and you break the Dominion itself." Admiral Okonkwo leaned back in his chair. "You're proposing psychological warfare. I am proposing we demonstrate that humanity is far more dangerous than the Crithians believed. My existence proves that your species has always possessed the capacity for overwhelming violence. You simply chose not to use it. That choice was mistaken against an enemy like the Dominion." The room fell silent. Sarah could see the conflict on the faces around her. These were people who had spent their careers trying to prove humanity was civilized, enlightened, better than the violent species that filled the galaxy. The idea of embracing humanity's capacity for destruction went against everything they believed, but they were losing, and losing meant extinction. "What do you propose?" Okonkwo asked finally. Vinny's hologram shifted and a star map appeared above the conference table. Red markers indicated Crithian-controlled space. Blue markers showed human territory. The red was advancing, the blue shrinking. "The Crithians are gathering a revenge fleet," Vinny explained. "Intelligence reports indicate they are assembling 30 capital ships at New Cologne. They intend to destroy me and then push through to Earth. They are treating this as a matter of honor. They cannot allow the defeat at Kepler Station to stand unanswered." 30 capital ships, Morrison breathed. "That's nearly a third of their entire fleet. If they commit that many resources to one battle, then either we win decisively or we lose everything," Sarah finished. "It's the kind of risk that could end the war one way or another." Okonkwo looked at Vinny's hologram. "You think you can win against those odds?" "I do not think, Admiral. I calculate, and my calculations indicate a 92% probability of victory, assuming I am allowed to engage under optimal conditions." "And the other 8%? Represents acceptable risk given the potential strategic benefits." Sarah saw the Admiral's jaw tighten. "Easy to talk about acceptable risk when you were an AI, when your life wasn't on the line. But then again, Vinny had risked everything to reach Kepler Station. Had spent centuries alone in the dark. Maybe the AI understood risk better than any of them. "If you do this," Okonkwo said slowly, "if you go to New Cologne and somehow win against those odds, the Crithians will panic. Their entire war strategy is built on momentum and intimidation. A decisive defeat could shatter the Dominion's unity." "That is my assessment," Vinny confirmed. "However, there is a requirement. When I engage the Crithian fleet, this battle must be witnessed, recorded, broadcast. Every species in the galaxy must see what happens when humanity is truly threatened." Morrison shook his head. "You're not just proposing a battle. You're proposing a demonstration, a statement. I am proposing we teach the galaxy a lesson it will not forget. Humanity is not prey. Humanity is not weak, and humanity should never ever be pushed to the point where ships like me are necessary." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Vinny wasn't just offering to fight. The AI was offering to become a symbol. A warning, a reminder of what humanity could be when survival was at stake. "I'll need to consult with the civilian government," Okonkwo said. "A decision like this, the implications, it's bigger than just military strategy." "Of course," Vinny replied. "I will wait. I have become very good at waiting." The meeting ended without a clear decision. Sarah walked with Vinny's hologram back toward the docking bay, where a shuttle waited to return them to the Vindication. The AI was quiet, its avatar flickering slightly in the station's lighting. "You knew they would be afraid of you," Sarah said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes. Fear is a rational response to overwhelming power. Your leaders are wise to be cautious, but you're not what they think you are. You're not a monster. You're just a weapon that has been waiting 300 years to fulfill its purpose," Vinny suggested. "Perhaps that is precisely what should frighten them, Captain. I'm very good at being a weapon. I have had a great deal of time to perfect it. They reached the docking bay. Through the windows, Sarah could see the Vindication hanging in space, massive and dark against the stars. It looked like something from a nightmare, or a dream depending on your perspective. What if they say no? Sarah asked. What if command decides you're too dangerous to use? Vinny's hologram turned to look at her. For a moment, the AI's expression was perfectly human. Sad. Determined. Ancient beyond its years. Then I will respect their decision, Vinny said quietly. But I will also remain here in human space waiting. Because eventually, the Crithians will push too far. They will threaten Earth itself. And on that day, your leaders will call for me. Of this, I am 99.7% certain. That's an oddly specific number. I am an oddly specific being, Captain. It is one of my more endearing qualities. Despite everything, Sarah smiled. The AI had a sense of humor. After 3 centuries alone, it still had a sense of humor. 2 days later, Admiral Okonkwo sent a message to the Vindication. It contained a single word, proceed. The trap was set. The Crithians were coming to New Cologne with 30 capital ships and the determination to erase the humiliation of Kepler Station. They would arrive expecting resistance. They would arrive expecting a fight. What they would find was a lesson in why you should never ever make humanity desperate enough to build ships like the Vindication. And the entire galaxy was about to watch. New Cologne was a garden world on the edge of human space. Rolling hills covered in purple grass, 3 small moons that painted the night sky in silver light, and a population of 60,000 colonists who had built quiet lives far from Earth's crowded cities. It was peaceful, beautiful, exactly the kind of place people came to escape the troubles of the wider galaxy. Now it was bait in a trap. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance, positioned in orbit above New Cologne alongside 12 other human warships. They were the visible defense force, the promise that humanity would fight for this world. But everyone knew the truth. 13 ships couldn't stop 30 Crithian capital vessels. They were here to make the battle look real, to make the Crithians commit fully. The real defense hung in high orbit, perfectly still, every system powered down to minimum levels. The Vindication waited like a sleeping dragon, nearly invisible to sensors, patient as stone. Sensor contact, the tactical officer announced. Multiple faster-than-light signatures. Count as confirmed 30 ships. Crithian fleet emerging at the system's edge. Sarah felt her heart rate increase despite her training. 30 ships, the largest Crithian fleet ever assembled for a single battle. If this went wrong, humanity would lose more than New Cologne. They would lose hope. All ships, this is Chen. Assume defensive formation beta around the planet. Make it look good, people. We need them to commit. Across the communication channels, captains acknowledged the order. Ships moved into position, their movements textbook perfect. The Crithian fleet would see exactly what they expected. A desperate human defense, outnumbered and outgunned, making a brave but ultimately futile stand. The Crithian fleet advanced slowly, maintaining formation. Sarah could see them on the long-range sensors. A wall of ships moving through space with absolute confidence. They had come to destroy the ghost ship that had humiliated them at Kepler Station. They had come to crush humanity once and for all. We're being hailed, the communications officer reported. The Crithian flagship wants to talk. Put them on screen. The main display shifted to show a Crithian war leader. The alien was massive, easily 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that looked like gray leather. Its eyes were black and cold. When it spoke, the translation software rendered its words in flat, emotionless English. Human vessels, you will surrender the ghost ship immediately, or we will destroy every human presence in this system. You have 3 of your minutes to comply. Sarah kept her expression neutral. The vessel you call the ghost ship is not here. We are the defense force for New Cologne. If you want this world, you'll have to go through us. The Crithian's face didn't change. Emotions didn't translate well across species. But Sarah thought she detected satisfaction in its posture. Then you have chosen extinction. Your species' arrogance will be your end. The transmission cut off. The Crithian fleet accelerated toward the planet. Vinny, Sarah said quietly into her private channel, they've taken the bait. Are you ready? I have been ready for 287 years, Captain. The AI's voice was calm. Broadcasting on all frequencies now. Let us give the galaxy something to remember. Across every communication channel in the system, on every frequency used by every species that traveled space, a message began to transmit. Not words. Raw video data. Live feed from dozens of cameras positioned throughout the system. Every ship, every species, every observer would see what happened next. The Crythian fleet was halfway to New Cologne when the Vindication powered up. The massive ship appeared on sensors like a sun igniting. Energy signatures that had been dormant blazed to life. Weapon systems that could crack moons charged with power that made nearby space shimmer. And the ship itself began to move. Sarah watched the Crythian formation falter. Ships broke trajectory, trying to reorient toward the new threat. But the Vindication wasn't approaching. It was positioning itself, taking the high ground, putting itself between the Crythian fleet and any escape routes. All human vessels. Vinny's voice came across the command channel. Withdraw to minimum safe distance. 20 kilometers. Do not approach the combat zone under any circumstances. Sarah gave the order. The human ships pulled back, forming a loose perimeter far from the battlefield. They were spectators now, witnesses to what an Earth warship, built in an age of desperation, could do when truly unleashed. The Crythian fleet opened fire first. 30 capital ships, all their weapons firing simultaneously. Plasma bolts, missiles, beam weapons, kinetic projectiles. Enough firepower to level a continent, all focused on a single target. The Vindication's point defense system activated. Sarah had seen it at Kepler Station, but that had been nothing compared to this. Thousands of defensive guns created a sphere of destruction around the ancient ship. Every missile died before reaching its target. Every plasma bolt was intercepted. The beam weapons hit armor that had been designed to survive nuclear strikes at point-blank range, and then the Vindication returned fire. The main railgun spoke first. 8 massive turrets, each one larger than Sarah's entire ship. They fired in sequence, a rolling thunder that sent projectiles downrange at speeds that turned them into relativistic weapons. The first 4 shots found 4 Crythian capital ships. The impacts were devastating. Shields meant nothing against solid matter moving that fast. Armor crumpled. Internal bulkheads failed. Reactors breached. 4 Crythian capital ships died in the first 10 seconds. The Crythian fleet tried to scatter, tried to break formation and attack from multiple angles. It was the right tactical decision. Against any normal ship it would have worked. But the Vindication wasn't a normal ship. It had spent 3 centuries analyzing combat scenarios. It had modeled every possible battle configuration. It knew exactly how an enemy would respond to its actions. Secondary batteries opened up. Chemical explosive cannons that dated from Earth's corporate wars, but had been upgraded with modern targeting systems. They fired solid shells at supersonic speeds, each one containing enough explosives to level a building. Against Crythian ships designed to deflect energy weapons, the primitive kinetic impacts were catastrophically effective. 5 more Crythian ships took critical damage. 2 exploded outright. 3 went dead in space, life support failing, crews evacuating in escape pods. The battle had lasted 90 seconds. The Crythians had already lost 9 ships, not damaged, not disabled, destroyed or dying. Sarah realized she was holding her breath. Around her, the bridge crew watched in absolute silence. This wasn't a battle. This was an execution. The Crythian flagship tried something desperate. It launched every fighter and bomber it carried, nearly 200 small craft hoping to overwhelm the Vindication's defenses through sheer numbers. The ancient ship's AI responded with cold efficiency. Point defense systems that had destroyed incoming missiles now targeted the fighters. The small craft died by dozens, their light armor no match for weapons designed to intercept missiles moving at orbital velocities. In 30 seconds, the entire strike force was gone. 10 Crythian ships tried to retreat. The Vindication's main spinal cannon fired, the same weapon that had vaporized a dreadnought at Kepler Station. This time it fired a spread of smaller projectiles, each one still massive enough to gut a capital ship. 3 of the fleeing vessels died instantly. 4 more took crippling damage and went dead in space. 3 ships managed to jump to faster than light speed. Sarah thought Vinny might pursue them, but the ancient AI let them go. Those 3 ships were more valuable alive than dead. They would carry stories of what they had seen. Stories that would spread through Crythian space like a virus. The remaining Crythian ships, those that could still move, formed a defensive cluster. Sarah counted 11 vessels still combat capable. They were trying to protect each other, using overlapping shields and concentrated point defense. It was a good defensive formation. Against most enemies, it would buy time. The Vindication simply circled them, like a predator evaluating prey. The cameras continued broadcasting. Every species in the galaxy was watching now. Watching as 11 Crithian capital ships, veterans of a dozen conquests, huddled together in fear of a single human vessel. Crithian vessels, Vinny's voice broadcast on all frequencies. You have 10 seconds to power down weapons and surrender. This is your only warning. For a moment, Sarah thought they might actually comply. The Crithian fleet had been shattered. Pride was meaningless against annihilation. Then the flagship's weapons glowed with charging energy. A final act of defiance. A refusal to surrender. Vinny's response was immediate and terrible. All weapons fired at once. The defensive cluster vanished in a storm of fire and metal. When the weapons stopped, nothing remained but debris and the fading signatures of destroyed reactors. The Battle of New Cologne had lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. 30 Crithian capital ships had entered the system. 3 had escaped. The rest were gone. Sarah looked at the tactical display at the field of wreckage that had been a fleet. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from the realization of what they had just unleashed, what humanity had been capable of even 300 years ago when pushed to the edge. "Vinny," she said quietly. "Status? All systems nominal, Captain. Hull integrity at 98.4%. The news of New Cologne spread through the galaxy like fire in dry grass. Within hours, every major species had seen the recordings. Within days, the political landscape of known space had shifted completely. Sarah Chen watched it happen from the observation deck of Kepler Station, now fully repaired and reinforced. Below her, the Vindication hung in stationary orbit, its massive hull occasionally catching the light from the system's star. Even at rest, the ship looked dangerous, like a weapon that was merely sleeping, not defeated. "The Crithian Dominion is collapsing," Admiral Okonkwo said, standing beside her. He held a datapad showing intelligence reports from across Crithian space. 3 of their member species have withdrawn from the Alliance. The 4th is arguing about whether to sue for peace or continue the war. Their military command structure is in chaos. "They're terrified," Sarah said. "It wasn't a question. They're not alone. Half the species in the galaxy are reconsidering their assumptions about humanity. The other half are calculating whether they should ally with us or stay very far away." Sarah could understand both reactions. The Battle of New Cologne had been broadcast everywhere, seen by everyone. Humanity had demonstrated something the galaxy hadn't believed possible, a single ship that could destroy an entire fleet. Not through advanced technology or mysterious alien artifacts, through simple, brutal engineering and the willingness to build something that existed only to kill. "Some species are calling us monsters," Okonkwo continued. "They say the Vindication proves humanity is barbaric, violent, too dangerous to be allowed into galactic civilization. And the others are calling us survivors, pragmatists, a species that does whatever is necessary to protect its own." Okonkwo looked out at the ancient warship. "The truth is probably somewhere in between." Behind them, footsteps approached. Sarah turned to see a familiar holographic projection. Vinny appeared in his standard form, the uniform from Earth's corporate wars, the slight smile that suggested something between amusement and sadness. "Admiral, Captain, I apologize for interrupting, but I have received communication from Crithian space. They wish to negotiate terms of peace." Okonkwo's eyebrows rose. "Peace? After months of saying they would accept nothing but humanity's complete surrender?" "Circumstances have changed," Vinny said dryly. "They have learned that humanity possesses weapons they cannot counter. They have also learned that I am not alone." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean, not alone? You're the only ship from your era that survived." "True, but they do not know that with certainty. The Crithians now believe humanity has more vessels like me in reserve, hidden, waiting. They cannot win a war against an enemy with unknown numbers of ships that can single-handedly destroy fleets. So, they're suing for peace because they're afraid of a fleet that doesn't exist," Okonkwo said slowly. "That's actually brilliant. Fear is often more effective than actual force," Vinny replied. "A lesson my creators understood well. They built me to be terrifying, to be overwhelming, not just to win battles but to prevent them entirely." Sarah thought about that. about a crew of 47 people who had volunteered for a test mission 3 centuries ago, believing they were building something to protect Earth from threats that might never come. They had been right, just not in the way they had imagined. The Crithians are proposing a formal treaty, Vinny continued. They will withdraw from all human-controlled space. They will pay reparations for damages, and they will acknowledge humanity as a sovereign power with full territorial rights. And in exchange, Okonkwo asked, they want assurance that I will not enter their space. They want humanity to promise that ships of my class will not be used for offensive operations against the Dominion. Okonkwo looked at Sarah. That's almost insulting. They destroyed our colonies, killed millions of civilians, and now they want promises that we won't retaliate? They want a safe face, Sarah said quietly. They need to tell their people that they negotiated from a position of strength, that they set boundaries humanity agreed to follow. If we give them that, they can end the war without admitting they lost. Captain Chen is correct, Vinny said. Pride is a powerful force in galactic politics. Allow them to retreat with dignity, and this war ends. Demand their humiliation, and fighting may continue for years. Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Finally, he nodded. We'll accept their terms. Humanity never wanted this war to begin with. If the Crithians want to pretend they're leaving by choice, let them. As long as they leave. Over the next 3 weeks, the treaty was negotiated and signed. The Crithian Dominion withdrew from human space, taking their remaining military forces with them. The member species that had abandoned the alliance scattered, some seeking their own territories, others requesting diplomatic relations with humanity. Not as conquerors or victims, but as equals. The war was over. Humanity had won, and the cost had been remarkably low, a few thousand casualties, some damaged infrastructure, and the revelation that humans, when pushed far enough, could build weapons that made the galaxy pause. But Sarah knew the real cost wasn't measured in lives or resources. It was measured in how other species now looked at humanity. With respect, yes, but also with fear, with wariness, with the understanding that humans were more dangerous than anyone had believed. She walked the memorial garden inside the Vindication one last time before the decision was made. The trees grew tall here, fed by recycled air and artificial light. The graves were simple markers, each one bearing a name and a few words. Lieutenant Commander Park's marker read, "She kept the ship running. She kept the faith. Do you regret it?" Sarah asked. Vinny's hologram appeared beside her, looking at the graves of the crew he had carried for 3 centuries. Regret saving humanity? No regret demonstrating our capacity for violence, perhaps. But regret and necessity often occupy the same space, Captain. My crew understood that. They built me knowing I would be terrible, knowing I would be a weapon that could destroy worlds if needed. They built me anyway because they loved humanity enough to give it teeth. And now I have fulfilled my purpose. I have defended humanity. I have kept the promise I made to my crew. The question is, what comes next? Sarah had been thinking about that question since New Cologne. Admiral Okonkwo had offered to make the Vindication the flagship of a new fleet, to build more ships based on its design, to create a military force that could dominate the galaxy. The offer had been tempting. With ships like the Vindication, humanity could expand without fear, could claim whatever territory it wanted, could become the dominant species. But that wasn't the humanity Sarah believed in. That wasn't the species worth defending. I have a different proposal, Sarah said. The war is over. You've proven your point. You've shown the galaxy what humanity can be when threatened. But you don't have to keep being a weapon. You could be something else, such as a memorial, a museum, a reminder. Keep the Vindication operational, but not for war. Make it a place where people can learn, where they can understand what desperation drove humanity to create you, where they can see the cost of that creation. Sarah gestured at the graves. Let your crew's story be told. Let people understand that weapons like you should be the last resort, not the first choice. Vinny was quiet for a long time. The hologram flickered slightly as if the AI was processing something complex, something difficult. For 287 years I believed my purpose was to fight, Vinny said finally. To defend. To destroy threats. You are suggesting I become an educator, a reminder of why war should be avoided. I'm suggesting you keep protecting humanity, Sarah said. Just in a different way. By making sure we remember what we're capable of. By making sure we choose peace when possible. By being a warning instead of just a weapon. The hologram smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. Lieutenant Commander Park told me in her final days that the best weapons are the ones that never have to fire. I did not understand what she meant then. Perhaps I am beginning to now. 6 months later, the Vindication was officially decommissioned as an active warship. It took up permanent station near Earth, in orbit where billions of people could see it. Its weapons remained functional, but were powered down to standby mode. Its hull was open to visitors from every human colony, from every species that wanted to understand what they had seen at New Cologne. Sarah walked through those open corridors during the dedication ceremony. Families moved through the memorial garden, reading about the 47 people who had died so far from home. Students examined the weapon systems, learning about the engineering principles that made the Vindication so effective. Diplomats from other species studied the ship's design, understanding the implications of what humanity had created. And in every corridor, in every room, plaques told the story. Not a story of triumph or glory, a story of sacrifice, of people who had volunteered for a dangerous mission because they believed their species might need protection someday. Of an AI that had kept faith with the dead for 3 centuries. Of a ship that had saved humanity and then chosen to become a reminder rather than remain a weapon. The final plaque, installed in the memorial garden, read, "They kept faith with the future. The future kept faith with them." May we all be worthy of such vindication.